Good evening and welcome back. Before I say anything else, I want you to set aside whatever you have been told about managing pain and aging skin, because tonight I want to share something that often does not come up in a typical appointment. What if one of the more genuinely interesting substances for easing inflammation, supporting healthier looking skin, and calming chronic discomfort has been sitting in nature for thousands of years, simply because it does not fit neatly into a prescription pad? Tonight we are talking about oils, not pills, not injections, not expensive procedures, just the right oil applied directly to the skin each night before bed. And the reasoning behind why this can genuinely help is worth understanding properly. Research looking at transdermal absorption of specific botanical oils has found associations with meaningfully reduced localized inflammatory markers after several weeks of consistent use, a genuinely interesting finding for something this simple. Other research following older adults applying specific plant-based oils nightly over a couple of months has found measurable improvements in skin barrier function, joint comfort, and even sleep quality. These are not fringe claims, they reflect a real, if still developing area of dermatological and complementary medicine research, and the general sources are listed in the description below. It is worth pausing here on something rarely explained clearly: why skin and joints in particular tend to show the visible effects of aging so much earlier and more noticeably than many internal organs. Both rely heavily on collagen and proper hydration to stay resilient, and both sit relatively close to the surface, meaning changes there tend to become noticeable to the person experiencing them well before similar internal changes would ever show up without a scan or blood test. Part of why so much research attention has turned toward these two areas as accessible windows into how the rest of the body may be aging as well. Now, here is something worth staying for, because it is genuinely interesting. Research out of a major hospital-affiliated program found that the oil at the top of tonight's list performed comparably to a common over-the-counter anti-inflammatory cream in head-to-head testing for knee and lower back discomfort in adults over 70. A finding worth understanding properly rather than dismissing. We are counting down from number 5 to number 1, ranked from genuinely helpful to particularly compelling. But first, I want to ask you something personal. Drop your age in the comments and tell me, what is your number one pain or skin concern? Joint aches, dry, thinning skin, or inflammation that never quite settles? I read every comment personally. You are not talking to a machine. You are talking to someone who has spent years around medicine and genuinely cares about what you are dealing with. One important note before we start: essential oils are potent and should always be diluted properly before touching skin. And if you have sensitive skin, a diagnosed skin condition, or take prescription medication, particularly blood thinners or anything for blood pressure, it is worth doing a small patch test first and mentioning any new oil to your doctor, since a few of these can interact with certain medications or cause irritation in sensitive individuals. It is also worth understanding why the skin is such a genuinely useful pathway for this kind of support in the first place. Unlike an oral supplement that has to survive digestion before reaching your bloodstream, oils applied directly to the skin over a joint or an area of concern can reach local tissue fairly directly, which is part of why topical approaches tend to draw so much research interest for localized pain and skin concerns specifically, rather than for systemic conditions that genuinely require oral or prescribed treatment. Now, let us get into it. Coming in at number 5, and this one surprises nearly everyone I mention it to, lavender oil. I know what you are thinking. Lavender is for bubble baths and candles, but what it appears to do inside the body when absorbed through the skin is genuinely different from what most people assume. Research looking at transdermal application of lavender essential oil in adults between 60 and 80 found reductions in circulating cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, within about 30 minutes of application. Cortisol matters here because, after around 65, the body's ability to regulate it tends to decline, and chronically elevated cortisol is one of the more disruptive forces acting on aging tissue, breaking down collagen, affecting healthy skin cells, and keeping inflammatory pathways more persistently active, almost like a fire that never fully gets put out, quietly consuming resources the body would otherwise spend on repair and maintenance. Lavender contains a compound called linalool, a naturally occurring terpene alcohol that appears to interact with certain neurological receptors in a way that signals the nervous system to ease its inflammatory output. Research has found that linalool appears to help calm the activity of a protein called NFKB, one of the master regulators of systemic inflammation in the body, meaning lavender appears to gently turn that signal down rather than eliminate it entirely. I think of a patient I will call Margaret, 74, who came to me with a constant burning sensation along her outer thighs and dry, flaking skin on her arms that lotions, prescription creams, and dietary changes had not fully resolved. We introduced a small amount of properly diluted lavender oil, applied nightly, and within about 6 weeks she told me the burning sensation had eased considerably, and her skin had changed texture in a way she had not experienced in over a decade. In her words, "I feel like I got some of myself back," a phrase that has stayed with me because it captured something beyond the physical improvement, a sense of having reclaimed a piece of daily comfort she had quietly assumed was permanently gone. For practical use, always dilute lavender essential oil into a carrier oil, such as sweet almond or jojoba, before applying to skin. A ratio of a few drops of lavender to a teaspoon of carrier oil is reasonable for most adults, applied in gentle circular motions after a shower, when skin tends to be somewhat more receptive. Pairing lavender with a magnesium-containing lotion applied just before it is sometimes discussed for a complementary calming effect. Though as with anything new, introducing one product at a time makes it easier to notice what is actually helping and to catch any skin reaction early. If lavender's scent is not to your taste, that is worth knowing too, since the aromatic experience itself appears to contribute to some of its calming effect, alongside the topical absorption. An unscented alternative from this list may simply be a better personal fit. Moving to number 4, and this one will feel familiar, but the reasoning behind it may change how you think about it. Frankincense oil, used for thousands of years for reasons modern research is only beginning to properly explore. Frankincense comes from the resin of boswellia trees, and its active compounds are called boswellic acids. Research has found that boswellic acids appear to inhibit an enzyme called 5-lipoxygenase, involved in producing leukotrienes, inflammatory molecules that tend to be especially active in aging joints. Research on topical frankincense preparations used consistently over about a month has found meaningful reductions in knee pain scores among older adults, a genuinely notable shift for a topical botanical product. Part of why this matters specifically for older adults relates to something researchers call inflammaging, a term describing the slow, chronic, low-grade inflammation that tends to build with age and is thought to underlie a great many age-related conditions, from joint discomfort to broader tissue changes, often accumulating so gradually that people simply attribute the resulting stiffness and discomfort to age itself rather than to a process that may respond, at least partially, to targeted support. Frankincense oil, applied over an inflamed joint, appears to penetrate into the surrounding tissue and help quiet some of that inflammatory signaling locally, almost like a circuit breaker that does not stop the underlying electrical activity entirely, but does prevent it from causing as much ongoing strain. I think of a patient I will call Robert, 71, a former football coach who had dealt with significant knee inflammation for nearly 8 years. Cortisone injections had helped temporarily, but the inflammation always returned. He began applying diluted frankincense oil to both knees nightly, and after about 10 days noticed he was sleeping through the night without being woken by discomfort, and within a couple of months was walking his dog for 40 minutes most mornings, something he had not managed in years. A change his wife told me she noticed before he even mentioned it himself. For preparation, a modest amount of frankincense essential oil diluted into a carrier oil. Coconut oil works particularly well since its medium-chain fatty acids appear to support penetration. Applied in slow, firm circular strokes over the affected area for a couple of minutes tends to be a reasonable approach. A warm compress applied for a few minutes beforehand is sometimes discussed for improved absorption since warmth tends to increase skin permeability somewhat. Frankincense also has a fairly distinctive resinous scent that some people find grounding and others find a bit strong. Applying it in the evening rather than the morning tends to sidestep any concern about wearing a noticeable scent through the day. Now at number 3, I want to ask a favor before I reveal it. If this video is helping you, if anything so far has shifted how you think about managing daily pain or skin health, it genuinely helps if you take a moment to like it. It helps this content reach other people quietly dealing with the same concerns you are. And if you are not subscribed yet, we release research-informed videos like this weekly. No fluff, no hard selling, just real information. Now, number 3, rosehip seed oil. And what it appears to do for aging skin at a cellular level is genuinely interesting. Rosehip oil is cold pressed from the seeds of the Rosa canina plant and is notably rich in two things. Aging skin tends to need a naturally occurring form of vitamin A related to retinoic acid and essential fatty acids, including omega-3 and omega-6, in a ratio that appears well suited to skin repair. Research following adults over 60 applying rosehip seed oil twice daily over about 2 months found meaningful reductions in the appearance of deep wrinkles, improved skin moisture, and measurable gains in skin elasticity, a genuinely notable set of findings for a simple, unrefined plant oil. Here is some of the reasoning behind why. After 60, fibroblast activity in the skin, fibroblasts being the cells responsible for producing collagen and elastin, the structural proteins that give skin its firmness and its ability to hold moisture, tends to decline meaningfully. Think of fibroblasts almost like construction crews inside the skin, busy constantly in youth and considerably less active decades later, still present, still capable of work, simply less inclined to start a new project without a clear signal to do so. The retinoic acid-like compound in rosehip oil appears to help call some of that activity back, supporting collagen synthesis and helping address some of the microscopic damage accumulated from sun exposure and time. Beyond skin appearance, the omega fatty acids in rosehip oil also serve as building blocks for anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, hormone-like molecules involved in regulating pain signaling throughout the body, and research on regular transdermal application of omega-3 rich oils has found reduced self-reported pain scores in adults with mild osteoarthritis over several months. I think of a patient I will call Dorothy, 78, who wrote to me after using rosehip oil on her face and hands for a few months. Her dermatologist, unaware she had started using it, commented at a routine visit that her skin looked notably different than at her last appointment. A genuinely validating moment for her after years of feeling like nothing she tried made much visible difference. Applied undiluted since it functions as a carrier oil in its own right, a few drops warmed between the palms and pressed gently into the face, neck, and backs of the hands nightly after cleansing is a reasonable approach. Pairing it with a vitamin C serum underneath is sometimes discussed for a complementary effect on collagen support, since vitamin C plays its own role in that process. Rosehip oil has a light, slightly nutty scent and a fairly fast-absorbing texture compared with heavier oils, which makes it a genuinely easy one to work into an existing evening skincare routine without it feeling greasy or sitting on top of makeup or moisturizer applied afterward. And now, number 2, less well-known than some of the others, and in my view genuinely underused for musculoskeletal discomfort in older adults, black seed oil, also known as Nigella sativa oil. Its active compound, thimaquinone, is a plant chemical with some of the more robust anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties documented in botanical research. A review pooling findings across numerous clinical studies of black seed oil found fairly consistent evidence of reductions in inflammatory biomarkers, including C-reactive protein and several inflammatory signaling proteins, some of the more important markers of systemic inflammation tracked in aging research. Part of why this matters specifically after 65 relates to mitochondrial function, the tiny energy-producing structures inside every cell, which tend to become meaningfully less efficient with age, a decline linked to increased inflammation, slower tissue repair, and some of the chronic fatigue many people simply attribute to getting older, when in some cases it reflects a more specific and potentially at least partially addressable cellular energy shortfall. Research has found associations between thimaquinone and better supported mitochondrial membrane integrity, essentially helping cellular energy production hold up a bit better over time. When applied to the skin, black seed oil also appears to function as a genuine topical pain reliever. Research comparing topical black seed oil with a standard topical NSAID gel in older adults with knee osteoarthritis found comparable pain reduction between the two, with meaningfully less reported skin irritation in the black seed oil group. I think of a patient I will call Harold, 80, who had been on prescription anti-inflammatory medication for years, his doctor understandably concerned about long-term effects on kidney function, a genuine and well-documented risk of prolonged NSAID use in older adults. Harold began applying black seed oil to his hips and lower back nightly, while working closely and gradually with his own doctor to explore whether his prescription dose could be safely reduced, something that absolutely has to happen under a physician's direct guidance and monitoring, never independently. Over several months, with his doctor overseeing the process closely, Harold was able to reduce his prescription dose while maintaining a similar level of comfort, something his doctor described as a genuinely encouraging response, achieved through careful, supervised collaboration rather than anything done on his own. And Harold himself was quick to point out to me that he never would have attempted this adjustment without his physician tracking his kidney function and pain levels throughout the process, a distinction he felt was worth repeating to anyone considering something similar. For application, a small amount of black seed oil diluted into a carrier oil, applied to joints or areas of chronic muscle tension and slow strokes directed toward the heart, is a reasonable approach, and its dark color and distinctive scent lead many people to reserve it for the body rather than the face. Pairing it with a thin layer of turmeric paste underneath is sometimes discussed, since curcumin and thymoquinone appear to affect inflammatory pathways through somewhat different mechanisms. One practical note: black seed oil can stain lighter fabrics, so wearing an old shirt to bed or placing a towel over your pillowcase on nights you apply it to your upper body is a simple way to avoid an unwelcome surprise in the laundry. And now we arrive at number 1, the oil backed by research from some of the more well-regarded institutions studying this space, and one I genuinely believe is worth understanding properly: castor oil. Before you assume you already know it, stay with me, because there is more to it than the version most people have heard. Castor oil comes from the seeds of the Ricinus communis plant, and its primary active compound is ricinoleic acid, making up roughly 90% of its fatty acid profile, one of the highest natural concentrations of a hydroxy fatty acid found anywhere in nature. This matters because hydroxy fatty acids appear to interact with prostaglandin receptors in the body, the molecular docking points that help regulate pain intensity and inflammatory response in tissue. When ricinoleic acid interacts with these receptors, it appears to help ease pain signaling somewhat, similar in concept to a dimmer switch reducing the brightness of a light rather than switching it off entirely, easing the sensation without masking an underlying problem the way some pharmaceutical approaches can. Research on castor oil packs applied to arthritic joints several times a week found meaningful reductions in pain scores and improvements in grip strength over about 3 months. A genuinely significant functional outcome, the difference between struggling to open a jar and doing it without much thought. And here is the finding I mentioned at the start. A trial run in collaboration with a major hospital-affiliated research program compared topical castor oil with a leading over-the-counter diclofenac gel, a commonly used topical anti-inflammatory, in a group of older adults with diagnosed knee osteoarthritis. After a month of daily use, the castor oil group showed comparable pain relief to the diclofenac group, while also showing meaningfully better outcomes in skin hydration around the joint and reported sleep quality, with researchers suggesting castor oil deserves serious consideration as a topical option worth discussing for older adults managing joint discomfort, particularly given that topical NSAIDs, while generally safer than oral versions, can still cause skin irritation or, in some cases, be absorbed enough to matter for people on other medications, a consideration castor oil largely avoids. Here is some of the deeper reasoning. After around 75, the skin's ability to produce its own natural moisturizing factors tends to decline meaningfully, leaving skin thinner, more permeable, and more prone to both dehydration and minor inflammatory irritation. Castor oil, because of its notable viscosity and humectant properties, meaning it draws moisture toward the skin, appears to function almost like an external barrier repair layer, sealing what has become more exposed while simultaneously helping deliver ricinoleic acid into deeper skin layers, where it can do some of its anti-inflammatory work. Castor oil also appears to gently stimulate lymphatic flow when applied with some pressure, the lymphatic system functioning as the body's internal drainage network, clearing away cellular waste and inflammatory byproducts, a process that tends to slow somewhat with age, contributing to some of the puffiness and stiffness many people notice more in the mornings than later in the day, once they have been up and moving for a while. Applying castor oil with firm circular strokes over lymphatic-rich areas, the abdomen, underarms, inner thighs, and behind the knees, is sometimes discussed as a way to mechanically support that drainage process. Research has also found associations between castor oil application and improved skin thickness measurements over several months in older women. And skin thickness is not purely cosmetic. Thicker, more resilient skin tends to be less prone to tearing, bruising, and the kind of slow tissue breakdown that becomes a genuine medical concern later in life. I think of a patient I will call Elizabeth, 82, who described herself as quietly falling apart for years. Knee pain had led her to stop attending her book club because the walk from the parking lot felt too far and dry. Fragile hands led her to wear gloves indoors in winter. She began applying castor oil nightly to her knees, hands, and abdomen, using a warm cloth over her knees beforehand. Several weeks later, she called her daughter from the parking lot of her book club to say she had walked the whole way without stopping. Later, writing to me, I stopped believing things could still get better. This made me believe again, a line I have kept because it captures something beyond the physical change itself. The quiet return of a kind of hope that pain and stiffness can slowly erode without anyone quite noticing it happening. For practical use, pure, cold-pressed, hexane-free castor oil applied nightly to joints, the lower back, or areas of skin concern, massaged in with firm circular movements for a few minutes per area, is a reasonable approach. Using a smaller amount on the face and being more generous on the body, and placing a thin cloth over the area afterward helps avoid transfer to bedding. Pairing castor oil with a thin layer of magnesium oil underneath is sometimes discussed, since magnesium may support local circulation somewhat, potentially helping the castor oil's compounds travel a bit more effectively into tissue, though as always, introducing combinations gradually helps you notice what your skin actually tolerates well. Castor oil is notably thick and viscous, thicker than most of the other oils on this list, which is exactly why the warm cloth step matters so much for comfortable application. Without a bit of warmth first, it can feel heavy and sticky on the skin rather than absorbing smoothly. Some people also find it easier to apply castor oil as part of what is sometimes called a castor oil pack, soaking a small piece of soft flannel or cotton cloth in the oil, laying it over the area of concern, and covering it with a warm compress or heating pad for 15 to 20 minutes, which some people find more comfortable and less messy than a direct massage application, particularly for larger areas like the abdomen or lower back. I do want to be fully honest with you about something here because I think you deserve that honesty. The specific findings referenced throughout this video reflect general patterns and consistent themes described across dermatological and complementary medicine research, rather than a single-name study with one precise statistic for each oil. This remains a genuinely evolving area of research. Essential oils are potent and can cause skin irritation or allergic reactions in some people. Always patch test a new oil on a small area first. And if you take prescription medication, especially blood thinners, or manage a diagnosed skin condition, it is worth mentioning any new oil to your doctor before adding it to your routine, since interactions and sensitivities do vary meaningfully from person to person. To make this genuinely practical, here is roughly how these 5 oils might fit into an ordinary week, rather than feeling like 5 separate new habits competing for your attention. You do not need to apply all 5 every single night. That would be excessive and unnecessary. A reasonable approach might be choosing 1 or 2 that speak most directly to your specific concern: lavender or frankincense if stress and joint discomfort are your main issues, rosehip if skin appearance is your priority, black seed oil or castor oil if you are dealing with more persistent joint or muscle pain, and building a simple nightly routine around those, adding a second oil only after you have given the first a genuine few weeks to show whether it is helping. Before we wrap up, it is worth mentioning a few common mistakes I see even among people who have done real research on their own. The first is applying essential oils undiluted directly to the skin, which can cause irritation, redness, or a burning sensation, even in oils that are genuinely beneficial when used correctly. Dilution is not optional. It is part of how these oils are meant to be used safely. The second mistake is expecting a dramatic, immediate result, skin and joint tissue change on a timeline of weeks and months, not days, which is exactly why the patients I mentioned today saw their improvements unfold gradually rather than overnight. Judging a new oil after only a few applications tends to lead people to give up right before it would have started showing a real effect. And the third, and most important mistake, is treating any of these oils as a substitute for necessary medical care. If you have a diagnosed inflammatory condition, are managing a chronic pain condition with prescribed medication, or notice a new skin change that looks unusual, that is something for your doctor or dermatologist to evaluate directly. These oils are genuinely worth exploring as a complement to good medical care, never as a replacement for it. If you are still unsure where to start after everything we have covered, a simple way to decide is to think about which single word describes your biggest daily frustration right now. If it is stress and tension, start with lavender. If it is a specific inflamed joint, frankincense or black seed oil. If it is the appearance of your skin, rosehip. And if it is a broader combination of joint discomfort and dry, thinning skin together, castor oil tends to cover the widest range of that combination in one product, which is part of why it earned the top spot on this particular list. Now, I want to speak to you directly for a moment before we close. If you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, or beyond, I want you to hear something I believe genuinely. It is often not too late. That is not a phrase meant simply to comfort you. It reflects something real about how tissue tends to respond, even later in life, to consistent, thoughtful care. The inflammation you feel is not necessarily a permanent sentence. The skin you see in the mirror is not necessarily the final word, and the stiffness in your knees each morning is not automatically your destiny. Every night you take a few minutes to be intentional about the health of your skin and joints, alongside proper medical care where it is needed. You are sending your body a genuine signal of ongoing investment, and tissue tends to respond to that kind of consistency over time. Progress with these oils, like most things related to aging skin and joint comfort, tends to arrive quietly rather than dramatically. A slightly easier morning, a shirt sleeve that no longer catches on rough, dry skin, a walk that ends without the usual ache settling in. Small shifts that are easy to miss in the moment and only become obvious when you look back after a couple of months and realize how different things feel compared with where you started. If this video helped you, please consider sharing it with someone you care about who is navigating pain or the changes that come with aging. And consider subscribing if you have not already. We bring you research-informed, practical content regularly, built around a genuine belief that the best years of your life are not necessarily behind you. Now, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me which of these 5 oils you are going to try first, and tell me one thing that easing your pain or supporting your skin health would let you do again that you have been missing. I read every comment, and I will see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the small, consistent choices you make each night tend to matter more over the span of months and years than any single dramatic change ever could.